The first shortcut that you must learn is Alt-HAC to center the content in your cells. And this is essential because, no, I'm just kidding. Now, I will have another video coming out soon on these more complicated shortcuts, but this video is about getting you the best bang for your buck. The shortcuts I'm going to be teaching today are extremely easy to master and can be implemented into pretty much anything you create in Excel, excluding the more generic shortcuts like Control S that apply to pretty much any application. So without further ado, these are the most functional shortcuts for you to master in Microsoft Excel. This first shortcut is so easy and will save you so much time, and that's using tab to help you write your functions. So let's write an average function here. So we have equals AVER, and after those first four letters, you can see average is the first function to pop up here in blue. So you can just hit tab, and we've selected the function without having to type it all out. Now let's say we want to write an average ifs instead. We'll start with those first four letters, and now you can just use the down arrow to toggle down to average ifs and hit tab to select the function. This next shortcut will help you navigate across your sheets very quickly, and that's Control plus any arrow key. And what this does is it allows you to jump to the start or end of any range of cells. So starting in cell Q12 here, if we want to get over to cell B2, we can do Control left arrow to jump to the next filled cell, which is E12, Control left again to jump across that range to B12, and then Control up to jump up to B2. So this allows you to navigate across this range of cells very quickly with Control plus any arrow key in any direction. So if we delete the content in this cell, for example, and go up to the top of column D, now if we do Control arrow key, this will only take us down to row 10 because we have a blank in row 11. And finally, let's say if we want to see if there is any content in column F, we can go to column F and do Control down, and you can see this takes you all the way to the bottom of the sheet, so you know the column is completely blank. Then we can do Control up, and that takes you back up to the top. Now we can build off that last shortcut with Control Shift arrow key, and this functions in the exact same way, but this time we are selecting all those cells that we were jumping across previously. So let's start by selecting our bold column headers at the top, so we can navigate over to cell E2 and do Control Shift left arrow key to select that entire range of headers. If we want to select all the data in this sales column here, we can go to cell E3 and do Control Shift down. And to select this entire range of data, you can go to any one of these corners, it doesn't matter. We'll start in the top left and we'll do Control Shift down and then right, and that's how you select the entire range very quickly. Next, we have Control minus to delete cells and Control Shift equals, another way of saying Control plus to insert cells. So let's start by adding in a new column between name and office here. So we can select the office header in D2, Control Shift down to select all of those cells, and Control Shift equals to insert. We want to shift cells over to the right, and we have a new column. Control Z to undo. Now let's say we want to delete the name column. We can go over to C2, Control Shift down to select, Control minus to delete, and let's shift those cells over to the left, and Control Z to undo. Now let's look at adding in some new rows. Let's say we want to add in a new row above Caroline here. So we can go over to the left here, Control Shift right to select, Control Shift equals to insert, and we want to shift those cells down. Now after we undo, let's say we want to add in more than one row. So you're going to insert as many rows as you have selected. So if we want to insert 3 new rows, I can do Shift down and down again to select 3, then Control Shift equals, shift cells down, and we have 3 new rows of data. Finally, let's delete a row as well. So if we want to get rid of Kevin down the bottom, we can go down to his row, select it, Control minus, hit enter, and we've deleted those cells. And this brings us to Control space, which will select the entire column in our sheet, and Shift space, which will select the entire row in the sheet. And these can be used in tandem with Control minus and Control plus. So for example, if we want to delete the entire column D, we can select any cell in the column, Control space to select the column, and Control minus to delete. And if we want to insert a column to the left of column C, we can use Control space to select the column and Control Shift equals to insert. And the same concept applies for rows. So if we want to delete this entire row 17, Shift space to select, Control minus to delete. Or to insert a row here, we already have it selected, so we'll perform Control Shift equals to insert. And putting these two shortcuts together, we have Control Shift space. And if we select a random disconnected cell like here in J19 and perform Control Shift space, it's going to select the entire sheet. So it's the same thing as clicking this button up in the top left corner. But if we select a cell within our data range here and perform Control Shift space, it selects that entire array. And this is the fastest way to select a data array like this. And if you've seen any of my Excel videos in the past, you know that putting this data into a table is an absolute must. So we can do that with our next essential shortcut, Control T. So let's select our entire array with Control Shift space and Control T to create a table. Our table does have headers based on what we selected in the array, so we can hit OK. And let's go ahead and right away name our table, and we'll call it sales. So now that we have a table, there are slight changes to our essential shortcuts, which is going to make our lives really easy. So now if we click into any cell within our table, Control space is going to select that entire table column, not the sheet column. And same thing for Shift space. It's going to select that row within the table, not the sheet row. And Control Shift space will select all the data in your table, excluding headers. And one quick change here is we now have a blank for Mason's sales. So let's use this information to write a few quick functions to solve these problems here. So for average sales, we can write an average function, use tab to select that function. And rather than using Control Shift down, you see we run into the blank here. And in a long table, you could run into multiple blanks and possibly make a mistake. So instead, you can just click into any cell within the sales column and perform Control space, and we've selected that entire table column. Close parentheses, hit enter, and there's our average. Now let's get the data for salespeople with at least $10,000 in sales, and this is going to be a filter function. So first, let's fill in our headers. So we can say equals and use Control left and Control up to get to the headers, and Shift space to select our table headers. Hit enter, and now let's write our filter function. So equals filter, and I want the entire table array. So let's go into a cell within our table, Control Shift space to select all of that. And for include, I want to include rows where the sales are greater than 10K. So select any cell within sales, Control space, greater than or equal to 10,000. And if empty, let's return NA. Close parentheses, and there are our results. And as your skill set grows, you're going to be dealing with more data and more data sources. So we need some shortcuts to deal with that. So in our extended sales table here, first let's clean up these sales units columns here and round these to the nearest whole number and add commas where necessary. So we can click into any of these cells here. Let's do Shift right and Control space to select all those. And then to pull up number formatting, we can perform Control 1. I want a number with 0 decimal places, and we'll add a comma separator. Hit OK, and we've cleaned that up successfully. Next, I want to add in another column here in our table for the office, and that information is going to come from our employees table in another sheet. And the shortcut we can use to toggle between sheets is Control function and then up arrow, which is going to take you to the left, and down arrow, which is going to take you to the right. So if we want to go look at the employees sheet, we can do Control function down and then down again, and that takes us across to that sheet. And then to get back to the sales table, Control function up and up again. So let's go ahead and write our X lookup here to pull in the office data. And we're going to be linking the employee IDs. So equals X lookup value is employee ID, and we're going to look that up within the employee ID column in our employees table. So let's perform our shortcut, Control function down arrow again, employee ID, select the whole column with Control space, and our return array is going to be the office column. So again, select the cell, Control space. If not found, we'll return a blank, close parentheses, hit enter, and there's our information. And finally, let's get back to the basics with editing and entering content into your cells. So if you look at our sales numbers here, let's start by just taking the total, so we can use the sum function. And rather than just hitting enter here, which will enter the content into our cells and move us one cell down, I prefer to use Control Enter, which is going to enter in that content and keep us on the same cell. And I'd rather do this because I want to be able to see the output of my cell and then be able to immediately edit it again if I see any problems. So if I want to go back to edit the cell, rather than clicking into the formula bar up here, I can just use F2 and begin editing. So let's say maybe I want to add in a number, but then I realize, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So rather than trying to delete that and then maybe deleting part of our initial formula or entering it and hitting Control Z, I'd rather just hit Escape. And that's going to revert that cell back to what it originally was before we started editing. And there are, in addition, other ways to enter content into our cells, other than just Control Enter and Enter. So Shift Enter, for example, is going to enter in that content and move us one cell up. Tab is going to enter in the content and move us over to the right. And finally, we have Shift Tab, which will enter the content and move us one cell to the left. So that is the end of the video today. Please leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You can subscribe by clicking that button right up there. And feel free to leave a comment down below. Let me know what your essential Excel shortcuts are. And if I missed out on any important ones in this video, I'm always interested to see what you guys have to say, and I try to respond to all comments. And if you enjoy this type of content, I have an entire Excel playlist, so you can go ahead and click on that one right over there. And as always, thanks for watching.